MLB draft is being shortened. Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh calls for rule changes. A look back at the last two episodes of The Last Dance. But first, the NBA is looking at no fans for the foreseeable future.
This is Beyond the Stats with Zack and Tanner.
Tanner, like we said, the NBA is looking at no fans for the foreseeable future. So there's been reports of no fans stretching into June for this season, as well as no fans for the 20 to 2021 season if there's no vaccine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Zach, and this has been talked about even before the entire league shut down due to the coronavirus, with LeBron James' big comments at first saying that he would not play if there were no fans there, then kind of softening that, kind of being understanding with the situation. But I think this is a lot bigger, not just in terms of the players feeding off of the fans' energy, but also just in terms of the revenue. The NBA's revenue, 40% of that revenue comes from those fans. So this is going to be a big blow to them. Maybe not necessarily all bad, but it does make a big impact both on the court for the players, but in general, just for revenue-wise for the NBA.
Right. We're looking at it could be another month before a decision is made. Teams are just now allowed to go back into their practice facilities kind of based on state to state. So it's kind of hard to see where things are going to end up going. But I don't really see teams being allowed to have fans in their stadiums when it rolls around to teams trying to finish their season. Right. Like decision's not, I don't think it's a week away. I don't even think it's 2 weeks away. They'll make a decision soon, I think, within the next month. But who knows where that's going?
No, and that's right. It's just not one of those easy decisions that's just like, all right, tomorrow we're going to let you know right away. This is something that needs to be carefully thought about because they're trying to obviously put the player's perspective and the NBA in general, but they're also looking at other people in terms of the safety precautions because we're still in a time where we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know if this is going to blow up again like in the previous month or two. We don't know if it's going to die down. We're not sure where this is going to go. So I do like the decision, though, to at least put it out there that there is a very good possibility that there won't be fans. Both the key thing, I think, is also not just to finish this season, but also at the beginning of the next season. I think that's something that's very important to keep in mind. And if anything changes, I'm sure that the NBA will let us know right away. But again, as you mentioned before, this is something that is not just a quick decision. It has to be well thought out before making that final decision.
Yeah, Tanner, it really hinges on whether or not we get a vaccine, because that will really change everything. The perspective of Adam Silver, he's not trying to get anyone sick, and a vaccine is sort of the bar for getting things going back to normal. They're talking about a lot in the medical world. And in this case, the sports world is really affected by the medical world. So I think it just kind of hinges on if we get a vaccine to avoid this stretching into next season and possibly even the season after, because we really don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, it seems like things are just hinging on getting a vaccine. And as soon as that happens, things really start to change. Yeah. So we're going to wrap this segment up and be back talking about the MLB draft being shortened. This is Zachariah Begley alongside Tanner Camp on Beyond the Stats.
Back to Beyond the Stats. I'm Tanner Camp alongside Zachariah Begley. So, Zach, the MLB draft is being shortened to only 5 rounds. Kind of strange to hear that, but they're doing this, and the MLB and players, they reached an agreement to that. Kind of tell me a little bit more about the details as to what they're doing now and why the MLB is doing this.
Yeah, so the MLB is shortening the draft from 40 rounds to 5 rounds. So they're dropping 35 full rounds. That's a lot. That's a lot of players not getting drafted. But as a counter measure, teams can sign an unlimited number of undrafted free agents for $20,000, so 20 grand. Which is a way to kind of counteract that. So there's no fans. I'm not 100% sure why they're not. Why they're dropping so many rounds, but because the WNBA draft, the NFL draft, both had the full 7 rounds. They're just virtual. But maybe they feel like we don't need to get 40 rounds, or there's not been enough scouting that's worthy of 40 rounds of drafting. But of course, allowing teams to sign an unlimited number of free agents for $20,000 kind of offsets that. But yeah.
And you brought up a really good reason. Part of it may be just not enough scouting. I mean, this is one of those sports that even if you've looked at players in the fall or even in the winter with any workout videos or anything, the best way to still get a good idea is during that springtime, during their seasons, during when they're actually playing. And in a couple of reports, I've said that it's trying to save money for the owners. I think that's really interesting to bring up. And the other thing that especially stuck with me was that that they said the biggest hit, or who is especially getting hit the hardest with this, are the college players and the high school players, which I think, again, is very interesting that because they don't get a real chance, because they were betting on, because, with the MLB, obviously high schoolers can go straight to the MLB draft. So that's kind of challenging for them, especially since if they were a high school senior or even a college senior, even anyone in that collegiate or high school baseball level with not getting their season, that's very challenging for them.
Right. I mean, that's got to be hard to not be able to go and get drafted. I mean, yeah, they can get signed for 20,000, but like a 6th round pick makes way more than that normally, or a 7th round pick. I mean, even getting into the 10th round is way higher than the 20K that the MLB is offering undrafted free agents. So yeah, especially those in the sixth round down are really getting hurt, like you said. And it'll be interesting to see how many of these undrafted players end up being really good also, because of just the fact that there's less players being drafted, and there's probably going to be a number of undrafted free agents this year who make it to Major League Baseball, but have to wait for their contract to renew to really get the money that they would have gotten anyway. And also, how many of these people in the first 5 rounds won't be as good just to the lack of being able to scout in person? Like, how many of these picks will be missed?
And I guess with like all sports, we weren't really sure about the NFL draft, but that really worked. The WNBA draft, same thing, weren't really sure. That really worked out. And I guess the big difference maker in this is that you think it's 5 rounds, which is for a lot of the sports, but we're talking about losing, as you said, 35 rounds because it's normally 40. That's just that is a big difference maker. And with so many different positions in baseball, I mean, you got your typical, first, second, shortstop, you got those, but then you've also got guys that you wouldn't really think of, pinch runners. You've also got relief pitchers, different types of pitchers and situations. I think that's important to know, that it's not just your typical positions. It's those extra positions that end up making the difference, between making the playoffs, winning a World Series, or having a really bad season. But I can't wait to find out about the MLB draft, or find out more about it. The MLB has got all this to juggle with. First, this draft, they've also got to figure out a right plan for this MLB season. Looks like they're hopefully starting to piece together a plan, but only time will tell. And hopefully more updates will come on how the draft goes. And hopefully the MLB will be able to find a way to reach an agreement for their season. Jim Harbaugh has talked about some potential rule changes. We'll be talking about that. My name's Tanner Camp with Zachariah Begley, and this is Beyond the Stats.
Back here on Beyond the Stats, Tanner Camp alongside Zachariah Begley. Tanner, we're talking about Michigan's head coach Jim Harbaugh proposing eligibility changes for college football players. To break it down a little bit, Jim Harbaugh's idea is players should be able to leave even after their first year of college, so they can sign an agent and leave whenever they want. But if they don't get selected, they can come back to college and they're still eligible unless they sign as an undrafted free agent. What do you think about that?
I think this is, first off, great for Jim Harbaugh to reach out to, college football and reach out for high school players, because I was looking through this, one of my favorite things that was talked about was that he thinks that there truly are some early bloomers that are already ready for the NFL, kind of like with high school basketball players. You see some that honestly are immediately ready for the NBA, and we've seen that in the past with guys like Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, Dwight Howard. So I'm really happy that Jim Harbaugh is proposing this. I feel like I've seen a lot of high school football players that are ready for, even only need the 1 year of college to go through with it. So I'm really happy that he's putting this out there. And he's also obviously a really big name in football. So I'm curious to find out where he got his insight from, like if he thought of this himself or if he maybe asked around some other players or other coaches. But Harbaugh is a big name in college football and football in general. So I think this is a great idea, and I would really love to see this put into place.
Yeah, the big thing for me really is allowing them to come back to school if they don't get selected. I think that's the really big one, because if you don't have that caveat, they go after their first round to see if they'll get drafted, and they don't get drafted, and they don't get an offer, and now they're out in the cold. Like, I think that's the big one, is allowing players to return to college football if they don't get selected or they don't sign with a team, because I think that will kind of avoid the thing that happens in the NBA when a player goes out and then they don't get drafted and they don't get signed, and now they're not eligible to play college basketball anymore. And I think this goes along with Jim Harbaugh proposing that rule last year, where players should be able to, transfer one time and have eligibility right away. I think this is just Jim Harbaugh saying, hey, we need to improve the game. We need to modernize some things. We need to do some things that help the players a little bit more. And it's good to see someone who's a coach saying these things instead of just a player, or former players, getting someone who, yes, this could hurt him as a coach. He could have a really good player and then lose him after a year. But he realizes that we should be able to give these players a chance, because, if you're not an athlete, you're allowed to transfer. You don't have to wait a year. If you're allowed to test the job market and then go back to college. Why is it student athletes get penalized for wanting to test things when a non-student athlete, that's not a penalty at all? Just because they play a game. Not just because they play a game, but because they play a sport, they have to follow a different set of rules than other college students.
And Zach, there was a quote that I saw from Jim Harbaugh, and I think it really stuck with me, and obviously talk about this. He says, I think the fair thing to do would be not to restrict players to have to stay in college for 3 years. They can turn pro at any point. And I think that that's, again, the important thing. We saw the NBA have this before, and then they're even in the works of potentially bringing it back within the next couple of years. And it really is interesting that you see these big names. There are some football players, coming into college who need all 4 years to help develop and really become the players that they are. But in the years that I've watched college football, I've seen some players who, honestly, after first year, they're ready to go. It is understandable as to why they want them to go with the 2 years of college. But again, there are just some student athletes, in this case, football players, who are their goal and their dream is to play at the professional level. And is the education important? Absolutely. And that's the other part that Harbaugh talks about. He even mentions a little more that he wants to call the schools to pay for portions for their remaining like education if underclassmen like freshmen and sophomores decide to leave. And he quotes saying that such a policy promotes higher education as a top priority. So he's looking at every single aspect of this as well. And he's a very brilliant mind. And as you said, he could get into maybe trouble's not the right word, but it would hurt him or his reputation. But at this point, he's really looking out for the football players all across, not just from Michigan, but all across the country who are ready to go to the NFL. So big props to him. And as I've said before, I really hope this gets put into place.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to be completely honest, yeah, he's looking out for the players. And you're saying that's going to hurt him. I think that could actually help him in recruiting because it shows that he's player centric and he's thinking about the players and not just how the players help his program. But I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But I think not only is he looking in the right direction, I think the plan is actually really solid and could maybe barring there might have to be a couple tweaks, but I think that plan could be implemented as he stated it and it would probably work pretty well. Yes, will some players go before they're ready? Yeah, sure. But they have the fallback. They can come back to school if they don't get drafted. They're allowed to test the waters. That's what it's about, I think. Oh, you should leave if you can play. It's allowing these players to have choice and make decisions that are best for them, but also not be penalized for wanting to see if they can make it in the NFL. I mean, that's understandable. If you think you're good enough, you should be able to test it, but also if teams are like, nah, I don't know, and then you can get sent back. And that's I think where it's at. But yeah. So coming up next, we're gonna be talking about episodes 5 and 6 of The Last Dance. Tanner Camp, Zachariah Begley. This is Beyond the Stats.
Welcome back to Beyond the Stats. I'm Tanner Camp alongside Zachariah Begley. So, Zach, episodes 5 and 6 of The Last Dance, of course, the 10-part documentary series on the 97-98 Chicago Bulls season, along with touching on a bunch of different subjects, focusing on players and other subjects as well. And then, of course, 7 and 8 coming out tomorrow at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. In episodes 5 and 6, we'll start with 5. It started off with a segment just about Kobe Bryant. Of course, those who don't know of Kobe's passing back in January, so they did that in tribute to him. Zach, I don't know about you, but it really touched my heart to see that as a Kobe fan. What stuck out to you particularly about what they did for Kobe?
Yeah, I mean, man, so much about what's going on there. I mean, they even had Kobe in it, so clearly they got some filming done before his passing. But man, tugged on the heartstrings a little bit. The big thing, obviously, talking about that NBA All-Star game and talking about Kobe in his first one, only 19 years old, youngest of all time. Crazy thing was he was 19 and he wasn't even he started in the All-Star game and he wasn't even starting for the Lakers. And I think that's insane to me. But and just shows the greatness of Kobe. But Michael Jordan talking about how Kobe's going to try to make it one-on-one, and then they talk about the relationship, and everyone else made it seem like everyone kind of knew Kobe and Michael were kind of like Kobe took Michael's moves and things, but how strong the relationship actually was kind of shown through this documentary. And even Charles Barkley said something where he didn't realize they were that close. And I think that's insane to me. Like you can clearly see Kobe basically made his game Michael Jordan's game in a lot of ways. And I mean, there was different things, like Kobe was a little bit of a better 3-point shooter and things like that, but like their games were very similar. And yeah, and it was great to see Kobe, that relationship, because we kind of knew it on the outside, but didn't really see how close it really was.
And Kobe has even said, honestly, he's not sure if he wins his 5 championship rings without the wisdom of Michael Jordan. Even, of course, saying that to Kobe, Michael was like a big brother to him. So it was great to see and really dig deep at their relationship and how close they really were than I think a lot of people were expecting. But another part they talked about in episode 5 was how Michael Jordan got to his deal with Nike, and really shocking that he actually, Nike was like the last place that he really wanted to be with, and yet now here's Air Jordans, one of the most popular shoes that you can get today. Were there any details, or was there anything specific that stuck out to you in that segment?
So I knew Michael Jordan wanted to sign with Adidas instead of Nike, but I didn't know that his mom had to convince him to sign with Nike. And then I also knew that his deal was like the biggest in history, but like some of there were some details I knew, some details I didn't know. The Jordans are the most iconic basketball shoe of all time. It's also crazy to think he basically kicked off their basketball division, because before that they were really just a track shoe. Everyone wore Converse before, for the most part. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, all the stars, Dr. J, they were Converse guys. And then Michael Jordan comes out with these with Nikes, the Air Jordan shoe, and it kicks everything off. And it changes everything. And I mean, the only other person I can really think that had a shoe deal before that was Walt Frazier. He had the Pumas, but it's crazy to me. I mean, even last year, Michael Jordan outsold all today's top NBA stars combined, like Steph Curry, LeBron, everyone. So it shows you how big of an impact signing with Nike had for Michael Jordan and for basketball and even and culture in general, fashion in general.
Obviously, Michael Jordan, an icon in all different aspects, basketball, being the more well-known one, but really looking, and this documentary has shown it through the last 6 episodes, how much of an impact and how much of a star he really was pretty much all throughout the 90s and even a little bit in the late 80s. But the last thing for episode 5, at least, was they looked more into the Dream Team. Obviously, in my opinion, at least, one of the most iconic teams in all of sports, both in the Olympics and just sports in the world, and kind of the impact that made for him. I think the one thing that really stuck out, and I'm sure lots of other people have looked about a little bit of this, is that him and Scottie Pippen, who were on that team, played against Tony Kukoc, who was a part of that team. And I think that's something that should be looked more into. But what is that? Did you think that little rivalry, because Scottie and MJ were upset because, Jerry Krause was really excited about having Tony Kukoc join the team or drafting him. And do you think that really helped Scottie and MJ elevate their game with that little rivalry for the gold medal in that championship game?
Yeah, I think it did, but I also think it elevated Kukoc's game. And I think there's evidence of that, and how he didn't play great in the first matchup, but then played really well in the gold medal game in general. And it really added to, I think, those 90s teams once Kukoc joined in 94 to kind of get the second three-peat, the 3 more championships. But it's big, I mean, for Kukoc, because Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen gained respect because they saw, hey, Kukoc is tougher than we thought. He's not just some soft basketball player from Europe who thrives in the European game because it's not as physical. At least at that point, it wasn't. It was more skill based, and we're kind of seeing that game in the NBA now. But yeah, it's just to show that Kukoc had toughness and could play in the NBA. And Scottie and Michael basically baptismed him by fire in a way, like unintentionally, but they did, and they saw, hey, maybe we should have Kukoc on our team, and it turned into a great relationship. Like Kukoc said, Jordan said of Kukoc, I grew to love what Kukoc was as a player and as a teammate, but at the time we didn't like him. But it started there in that 1992 Olympics to show that, hey, we like Kukoc, and Kukoc is good at what he does. And yeah, I don't know. And that definitely added to them winning 3 more championships.
And I was just about to say, Kukoc, a big part of that second three-peat for the Chicago Bulls, and becoming a more physical or a tougher player, knowing that that's how it was going to be in the NBA. So now moving on to episode 6, the big thing throughout the whole episode was Michael Jordan and gambling. I will not say gambling problem because he still states that he never had a problem. But it is still important to mention the gambling part. It kind of hinted at it in one of the earlier episodes when betting on the Super Bowl. Zach, this is kind of really important because, and this is a great quote that Magic Johnson actually said, and it's that you guys are going to drive him, Michael Jordan, out of this game on the media, always constantly asking him of his gambling and, if he was going to come back. How much of an impact do you personally think that the media and just his gambling with those two combined, because he even said that not only was he exhausted physically, but he was actually more exhausted mentally. Do you think that is a big reason why he would eventually retire for that first time? Do you think that's a big reason for that?
I mean, that has to be part of it. I mean, it's also tough to win 3 championships in a row, but when you're hounded daily by the media about a gambling thing that, to be quite honest, it never, yeah, sure, he bet money, but it didn't affect his life in the same way. Like he's even said, if the other person didn't want to gamble, I didn't gamble. It was something he did for fun. It was like, he was like, yeah, I like betting, but it didn't affect him other than he lost some money on occasion. Like it didn't affect his family wasn't starving. It wasn't affecting his play on the court. He was just gambling. And wow. Yeah, I mean, I think the shock value of the numbers, I think, is what got the media, less so than he actually was having a problem, because he didn't gamble necessarily every time. We just only talked about the times he did gamble. And I think that's interesting.
Well, episodes 5 and 6 were really good, and I hope you are. I'm excited for 7 and 8. Same as 5 and 6. Not really sure what they're going to talk about, but I know I look forward to it, and I know you look forward to it as well. Well, again, Last Dance episodes 7 and 8 on ESPN, 9 o'clock, and that for episode 7, 10 o'clock for episode number 8, Eastern Standard Time. That's all that we have for you today. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Beyond the Stats. Beyond the Stats is on most podcasting sites. If you leave us some feedback, we would very much appreciate it. We're on YouTube as well, so be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content.
Till next time, this has been Zachariah Begley alongside Tanner Camp for Beyond the Stats.